Welcome to Watches with Dennis, and today we are doing a new experiment called Watch Roasts. So I've had a request from a few people to start actually being willing to roast watch collections, and so I have opened that up to my 99-cent club members. If they would like to pick 3 watches, I'd be more than happy to attempt to roast them. So, for those of you that are not familiar with roasts, let me be really clear up front. These are jokes. This is by consent. I'm going to be deliberately making fun of these watches. That's the whole point. So if you don't enjoy hearing negative things about watches, I would turn this off at this point. So Neffville is the first who actually turned some in. So thank you very much, Neff. And let's go ahead and get started with watch number 1, which is Neff's Tissot PRX Digital. Reference number is T137-263-11-03000. Okay. First thing wrong with this watch, it's 35 millimeters, so it's a watch for children. But more importantly than the sizing is actually how this digital display is implemented. Tissot brought this watch out in an attempt to revive a design, an early quartz digital design that they had back in the 1970s. The problem with the 1970s, besides the vast amounts of cocaine and disco, was the actual use of display technology was so green, so new, that no one knew how to aesthetically make it look good. And you can see just how bad it was by looking at this watch. This display is way too large. There's way too much negative space around it. It is just a vast module in a sea of silver. Speaking of silver, that's another issue I have with this watch. They actually have a gold, like a PVD version that is available. And it doesn't look good either, but it looks better. It leans into the cheese. This silver sort of steel looking watch just looks exceedingly dull and boring. It's asymmetrical on the case. I know they generously describe this as a tonneau shaped case, but with the button placement not being equitable like you would see on a G-Shock, but instead you have one button on the left, 2 on the right. It looks unbalanced. It truly captures what this watch was like in the 1970s, an abomination. Let's move on to Neff's second watch, and that is the Bulova Computron DCave Special Edition. The reference is 98C141. I can kind of see why someone would get this in this sort of retro future design aesthetic, but the watch it's really ugly. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look cheesy in the same sense that the Tissot does. This means to look weird, but when you start to dive in deeper, there's a lot that just really doesn't seem to work very well. The watch case itself is sort of at a sloped angle. They've tried to integrate the silicone strap with the case, but you can see that the vertical lines do not actually align. The strap lines are more plentiful than the lines on the top of the watch case, though that is hard to make out in this particular photo. I will compliment Neff on actually being able to get a photo of the display. He informed me that the display only stays lit when you activate it for 3 seconds. However, I believe that's 3 metric seconds. In normal human time, I believe it's 72 nanoseconds. So you barely have time to ever actually read this thing. Understandable, they don't want to kill the battery, but practically speaking, completely pointless. There are plenty of Pulsar-style watches that execute on case shape, display, and aesthetic a lot better than this. The Pulsar would be a case in point one, but that's not the only issue with this watch. The display is protected by mineral glass, which I think is a little shocking in this day and age. And speaking of shocking, don't get it wet because this is only splash resistant. All in all, a gimmick watch, which might appeal to those of you that were big fans of Tron or some retro future steampunky world. But for normal enthusiasts, there's a lot better to find in the realm of light up display watches. And Neff's third and final submission is an Oris. Specifically, it's the Big Crown pointer date, reference 01754-7741-4365-07 52071. Okay, the Oris pointer date. It's an icon. It's been around forever. There's so many different configurations, and for some reason, Neff basically chose the worst one of all of them. First, this is not powered by their new in-house movement, so enjoy your 38 hours of power reserve with your 1950s Sellita technology. Second, this watch runs with the Cathedral handset, a very old-school pocket watch style handset that I think is the worst handset of all the major handsets that are out there. I've seen worse handsets, but in terms of mainline style stuff, this vintage pocket watch style with the bulbous hour marker has always come across to me as exceedingly kitsch and ill-suited to modern-day timepieces. Not to mention, this is a 40mm watch, so for a watch that so desperately wants to lean into the vintage aesthetic, it sure is pretty big. Wearable, I'd be fine with the size if it didn't try and look like an old-school watch. I've always been impressed by the concept of the pointer date, but the problem is, without getting the watch extremely large, and bear in mind, this is already a 40mm watch, it's difficult to read the dates because of the amount of room you have at the chapter ring. The watch itself would actually be reasonably balanced if it was smaller, but you can see, given the 40mm diameter, just how much negative space exists towards the center of the dial, that Oris didn't know what else to do with it. But honestly, all these things are trifles. Everyone's going to have a subjective opinion on it. The problem with this watch is the two-tone case, for two reasons. One, first, the obvious, the 1980s called, and they would like their color scheme back. But secondly, this is not normal two-tone. This is not steel and gold. This is steel and bronze. This makes no sense to me. Why would you ever merge steel and bronze? Aside perhaps from protecting the wrist of a bronze watch wearer with a stainless steel caseback that nobody would see, to two-tone with bronze, I would rather than just PVD fake gold instead of bronze. So you're going to have a patina effect on the bronze elements and an unaging stainless steel aspect for the rest of the watch. This is like a child deciding to come up with a two-tone watch. Be like going up to little 5-year-old Billy and say, Billy, design me a two-tone watch. And Billy's like, okay, let's do Play-Doh. That's what this watch is like. I can only imagine as it ages more and more just how ugly and clashing this thing is going to end up looking like. Thank you again, Neff, for submitting your 3 watches for a watch roast. Those of you who have watched all the way through the video, please comment below which of these 3 watches is the worst. In my opinion, it's the Bulova Computron. The impracticality of the limited time that the watch can be displayed, the strap not really working with the integration of the case, and the case shape being odd in terms of how it's angled, all of that really just doesn't work for me. If Neff was wearing this watch and he was trapped in a burning building, I would not save him. And it would just be because he's collateral damage. It's not a judgment on him himself, but one fewer one of these Computrons in the world, it may be worth the sacrifice. But anyway, thanks again, Neff, for submitting the watches. And that is it for this video. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.